Go right to conduct of business. First item is item A, receive oral report and review status of local emergency related to the Glenview fire area and adopt a resolution continuing declaration of local emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The item before you tonight is one that has been on your agenda several times in the recent past since the September 9th disaster in the Glenview neighborhood. Specifically, that item requests your authorization to continue the declaration of a local emergency related to the incident in the Glenview neighborhood and its aftermath. As you know, that declaration or proclamation of emergency allows the city certain authorities that it would not otherwise have in order to assure that work is completed in an efficient, timely, and streamlined manner, specifically as it is needed for response to the disaster situation. In this particular case, and now that we are 10 or so weeks out from the immediate situation of the disaster, we are close reaching the time point where it will no longer be necessary to continue the disaster circumstances. And in fact, I'm not now expecting at this moment the need for any further actions under the emergency umbrella between now and the time that we would discontinue the emergency declaration. However, it does remain important to continue this procedure for the near term, as we would like to at least get through the first major part of the rainy season in order to evaluate any required activities to secure the Glenview, the damaged area in the Glenview neighborhood, and more specifically, those lots that have been that the homes have been removed, so there is a great deal of open area in the immediate blast vicinity. There is also a condition of property that in the Crestmore Canyon, at the mouth of the Crestmore Canyon, which is immediately adjacent to the blast site, that needs our continuing attention in order to assure that the rainy season does not create additional damage that, again, would need immediate attention. For that reason, we're asking your action tonight to continue the local emergency. And I failed to mention earlier the proclamation or the resolution that you're being asked to approve tonight would allow continued action without for the city to enter into contracts as it might become necessary without utilizing the competitive bidding process, which is called for in state law. Again, I don't expect additional need to utilize that authority, but would like your action in order to make that possible should it become necessary.
Any questions of City Manager? Action?
I'll go ahead and introduce the resolution continuing the declaration of local emergency.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. And I believe we have a...
May I continue?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I had thank you for your action. I also wanted to respond to a question that is generally within this topic area that was asked at a previous meeting when we discussed the continuation of the disaster circumstances, and that was what have been the expenditures that the city has incurred to date in response to the Glenview fire emergency. You have in front of you a summary of those costs, and I would encourage you to understand this as a capture of, first of all, costs only to date, but specifically costs that go beyond those that would have normally been incurred and were budgeted for normal city operations. As the City Council is, I'm sure, well aware, there has been a substantial expenditure of time, particularly related to immediately necessary disaster response and initial recovery action items that has been undertaken by staff during normal work hours. In other words, without incurring additional actual cost for the city, but causing the deferral, let's say, of other programs, projects, and activities, and/or more fully absorbing your limited staff time resource. So those costs do not show on this page. This page only addresses costs that are above budget and are directly attributable to the disaster incident. Specifically, those costs total $2,125,000. I would call to your attention one additional item, and that is that we have attempted to break these out in general categories of the initial response period and the recovery effort. You'll see that the initial response is particularly identified as representing that period from Thursday evening, September 9th, through September 11th, a period of just about 48 hours. That is how the state disaster response programs categorize the initial response period. It is generally that period of time that emergency crews were on duty at the scene and generally involved in fighting the fire, conducting rescue operations, rescue and evacuation operations, and then cleaning up the immediate firefighting activity. As you see, there are approximately just over $200,000 in costs that are directly attributable to overtime and supplies related to that effort. The vast majority of the costs that the city has incurred has occurred since that immediate response period and is generally categorized as related to the recovery effort. You'll see in the list that we've provided that the majority of those recovery costs relate to contracted activities that have previously been in front of the City Council for construction and design-related actions to stabilize and ensure the continuing stability of the Crestmore Canyon. You'll also note that these costs we've captured in one summary format, costs that have both actually been expended and costs that have been approved but not yet expended, and those are referred to as encumbered costs. So again, the $2 million cost is roughly 50% is attributable to activities related to stabilizing Crestmore Canyon, and the majority of the remainder of those costs are related to the ongoing recovery activity. This chart shows only those costs that have occurred since the incident on September 9th and continuing essentially through today. But I think it gives you an idea of the scope and the magnitude of the types of things that have incurred costs for the city, and I would say will continue to be significant cost items for the city going forward, along with a variety of things that remain unknown, but also those items that are continuing to emerge and to be more important as we move down the path towards full recovery of the neighborhood and of our community. I don't know if it's the council's interest, and I'm not really prepared tonight, but in anticipating a possible question that you might have as to how much of these costs are directly recoverable under the disaster reimbursement formulas. And at this point, I will only say that we are actively involved through the finance department and with the assistance of expert consultants who are assisting us in assembling, documenting, and evaluating the costs that we have incurred related to the state and the federal agencies' cost recovery programs and reimbursement procedures. So at this point, I'm not able to address that specifically, but we will certainly provide additional information to the City Council as we move forward.
All right. City Manager, I see it says mutual aid response costs incurred by other agencies are not included. Is anywhere in here the site cleanup?
The demolition and debris removal activities that were undertaken by, under the jurisdiction of San Mateo County are
Right.
not included
Okay.
in here.
All right.
There is you'll see there is one item, I believe it's $25,000 that's associated with debris removal, but that was a very small ancillary activity associated with that general activity.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, just on that issue with the San Mateo County, the health services cleanup, who pays that bill? Does the county pay that?
It's my understanding
County taxpayers?
that the county had entered into a previous agreement prior to undertaking the work. They have a letter agreement with PG&E that, at least my understanding, and again, the city is not a party to that agreement or to the costs or the activities or the relationship between the county and PG&E related to this. But it is my understanding that there is an arrangement by which PG&E will directly reimburse the county for those costs.
So, okay, so we anticipate some sort of document that absolves the city and the residents from any payment of that or any involvement?
We're not anticipating any
Okay.
documentation. It is clear
Okay.
in the relationship that was entered in before the work began between the county and PG&E, and then subsequently between the county and the individual residents, that when the city is indemnified for activities that are related to the demolition and debris removal, and that activity was completed under the jurisdiction and through the county and its relationship with contracted services.
Okay. I just want, you mentioned that the initial incident response costs, the $173,000 or the 209th, that was all with public safety, all related to the actual fighting of the fire and cleanup of the fire at the site.
First of all, let me say one thing that I forgot to say, but it's
Okay.
not related to your question, is that these are only the City of San Bruno's costs.
Right.
And they are only related to overtime or extraordinary costs. They do not cover by any means all of the people who, for example, were already on duty. But the answer to your question is, for the most part, these are public safety, police and fire responders, and the vast majority of the cost is overtime. There was a substantial response also by public works staff in particular that was also on overtime, and those costs are included as well.
I understand that you have to document this and for future reimbursement and, state reasons. But I think it's very important that the community knows what costs that the city went through, and not just for the bravery and and all the tireless efforts up at the site, but city staff and the volunteers and the part-time people down in various areas of the city throughout that weekend and then ongoing for the coming weeks. Whether we can recoup that or not, I think that's important to know. How much the city's invested in, into recovery.
Well,
Do you have any idea how much the mutual aid cost is going to be? Do you have any round numbers, or you don't care to say, or what is 400
How
first
much does it cost
responders?
to
How
have
much does it cost 400
first responders on
responders?
overtime?
A lot.
It costs a lot. No, I don't have an estimate at that time, but it, is that correct? We don't have it. Okay.
Okay.
I'm anticipating it's a very large number. Obviously, we had as you indicated, over 400 first responders. That does not include the people who responded, who assisted in the EOC and other activities. I can tell you that our estimate at the current time for regular salaries that, for example, your department directors who responded, many of whom worked throughout the night and who have continued to devote substantial portions of their daily activities to this response and recovery effort. Regular salaries that are not accounted for in this list are estimated in the $200,000 range. Benefit costs attributable to those salaries would add additional costs. So, and I guess I would say as well, and I think you alluded to it in your comments, Councilmember Rivera, that the financial impact does really not begin to express the significance of the response and the effort that has been applied primarily by your city staff, but literally by hundreds of people throughout the county and the state.
Any other questions?